Hello, everyone, and welcome to the John Marshall House History Where It Happened video series. Owned and operated by Preservation Virginia, the John Marshall House seeks to engage the public about the life and legacies of the great Chief Justice, his Richmond home, and the enslaved people who labored here through historic preservation and education. My name is Matthew, and today I'm going to present about the 1807 treason trial of Aaron Burr. Now, I want you to think for a moment as to what the word treason means. In order to commit treason, do you have to act against the government, or do you only have to be plotting something in order to be convicted of treason? Article 3 of the Constitution states that, quote, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort, end quote. Throughout this discussion, keep this question in the back of your mind as we examine the Aaron Burr treason trial of 1807, which gave Chief Justice John Marshall the opportunity to define treason in a way that serves as a strong example of judicial restraint. The treason trial of Aaron Burr is also the first high-profile trial in the United States' young history, receiving nationwide acclaim. Now, if you're familiar with the 2015 musical Hamilton, then you already know Aaron Burr as the man who killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel in 1804. After this infamous duel took place, however, Burr continued his trajectory into national acclaim and further cemented his legacy in the darker annals of early American history. After killing Hamilton, Burr was seen as a national villain, and the prospects of his law career and his political career were dismal at best. After being thrown off of President Thomas Jefferson's presidential ticket in the election of 1804, Burr felt that he needed a fresh start, away from the people who recognized and disliked him. Burr traveled down the Ohio River to the newly acquired Louisiana Territory. Along the way, he met a man named Herman Blennerhassett, who provided financial support and his home as a headquarters for Burr to help plot an eventual takeover of territory in the West. The Louisiana Territory seemed like a golden opportunity for a chance for Aaron Burr to get the acclaim and status of politician he had long sought. Now, why would Aaron Burr want to do this? What would cause him, as a former vice president and lawyer, to plot a potential takeover of American territory? The alleged plot involved Burr receiving a group of militias from Mexico and the western United States to invade the Louisiana Territory, where they would then form their own country and secede from the United States, with Burr presumably as leader. Reports of Burr's plans suggest that he was looking to form a separate government, and possibly even the capture of Washington, D.C. Some contemporaries even intimated that Burr wanted to establish a new Western nation with himself as emperor. Burr's allies eventually included dozens of frontier politicians and adventurers, but his most important co-conspirator was General James Wilkinson, the highest-ranking officer in the U.S. Army. Wilkinson had a reputation for duplicity. It would later come to light that he was a paid agent of the Spanish, but he also possessed vast resources. With his frontier troops, Wilkinson could serve as the face of any military operations in Mexico or the West. While Burr took care not to reveal the full extent of his plans to any of his potential recruits, his movements did not go unnoticed. He attracted attention wherever he traveled on the frontier due to his status as a former politician. By the time Burr returned to the East Coast in late 1805, the media was abuzz with rumors about what he was doing in his travels. In February and March of 1806, the federal attorney for Kentucky wrote President Thomas Jefferson several letters warning him that Burr planned to provoke a rebellion in Spanish-held parts of the West in order to join them into areas in the Southwest and form an independent nation under his rule. President Jefferson did not initially believe the whispered claims about Aaron Burr's plan and brushed off the news as political gossip. By mid-1806, however, Jefferson and his cabinet noticed reports of political instability in the West. And once again, suspicions and rumors of Burr raising troops and arms against the United States surfaced. General Wilkinson, who had aligned himself with Burr, lost his nerve to follow through the treasonous coup against the United States and betrayed the plot by sending warning to President Jefferson that a vast conspiracy was brewing in the West. The news left Jefferson fuming, and he immediately issued a proclamation instructing federal officials to quell the frontier plot and arrest its leaders. Around that same time, Aaron Burr allegedly sent a coded letter to General Wilkinson. Burr was arrested, charged with treason, and taken to Richmond for trial, to be put on trial. In addition to hosting Aaron Burr's treason trial, the capital of Virginia also served as Chief Justice John Marshall's main residence, and is one of the circuit courts upon which Marshall occasionally sat when the Supreme Court was not in session. As such, Chief Justice Marshall served as presiding judge in Burr's trial. Reporters and journalists from all over convened in Richmond to cover the trial, including a French portraitist, Saint Memon, pictured in the top right, who also capitalized on the excitement and influx of people that came with such a high-profile event. During the Burr trial, Saint Memon created this portrait of John Marshall and other leading figures in the city. Shortly after noon on May 22, 1807, the trial of Aaron Burr opened in Richmond. Chief Justice Marshall and Virginia District Judge Cyrus Griffin presided over the case. Surrounding Burr was his team of defense lawyers, including Virginians Edmund Randolph and John Wickham, among others. In addition, Burr himself played a major role in the trial, cross-examining most of the prosecution's witnesses himself. The prosecution included Caesar Rodney and William Wirt. Aaron Burr's trial brought into question two main ideas: that of executive privilege, which is the right of the president to keep certain documents, and the independence of the executive from the other two branches of government, the legislature and the judiciary. Burr's lawyers, including John Wickham, a local Richmond attorney and residential neighbor to John Marshall, asked the Chief Justice to subpoena President Jefferson, claiming that Burr's defense needed documents from Jefferson to present their case accurately. Jefferson proclaimed that as president, he was, quote, reserving the necessary right to decide independently of all other authority what papers coming to him as president the public interests permit to be communicated and to whom. Jefferson insisted that all relevant papers had been made available to the court and that he was not subject to this writ because he held executive privilege. Jefferson also argued that he should not be subject to the commands of the judiciary because the Constitution guaranteed the executive branch's independence from the judicial branch. Marshall decided that he could issue a subpoena despite Jefferson's position as president. Though Marshall vowed to consider Jefferson's office and avoid vexatious and unnecessary subpoenas, his ruling remained significant because it suggested that, like all citizens, the president was subject to the rule of law. Thomas Jefferson's administration left several legacies in the United States, including not only the peaceful transfer of power, but also asserting that presidents are not above the law. During Aaron Burr's treason trial of 1807, however, witness testimony proved inconsistent. And one of the few witnesses testified to an overt act of treason, Jacob Albright, contradicted himself in the process. Albright testified that Militia General Edward Tupper raided Blennerhassett Island and attempted to arrest Herman Blennerhassett, but had been stopped by Burr's armed followers, who raised their weapons at Tupper. In fact, Tupper had previously provided a deposition stating the exact opposite, that he had visited the island, had no arrest warrant, had not attempted to arrest anyone, had not been threatened, and had a pleasant visit with Blennerhassett. So therefore, we have two different accounts from Albright. Marshall had to consider the definition of treason and whether intent was sufficient for conviction rather than action. Is someone guilty of a crime that one only thought of committing, never actually carrying out? Marshall ruled that because Burr had not committed an act of war, he merely thought of committing an act of war, he could not be found guilty. The First Amendment guaranteed Burr the right to voice opposition to the government. To simply suggest war or to engage in a conspiracy was not enough. To be convicted of treason, Marshall ruled, an overt act of participation must be proven with evidence. Intention to divide the Union was not an overt act. There must be an actual assemblage of men for the treasonable purpose to constitute a levying of war. In other words, in order for Marshall to convict Burr of treason, Burr would have needed to actually raise arms against the United States. Marshall further supported his decision by indicating that the Constitution stated that two witnesses must see the same overt act against the country. Marshall narrowly construed the definition of treason provided in Article 3 of the Constitution. He noted that the prosecution had failed to prove that Burr had committed an overt act as the Constitution required. And as a result, the jury acquitted the defendant. Now, if Marbury was the first constitutional battle between President Jefferson and the Chief Justice, then the Burr trial was the second. Not surprisingly, Jefferson was persuaded, even before the trial began, that Marshall would attempt to embarrass him by bending the law to free Burr. Before the trial was over, Jefferson was just as interested in getting Marshall impeached as he was in getting Burr convicted. The spectators who witnessed the trial or read about it in the nation's newspapers clearly understood the symbolic nature of the conflict between Burr and Jefferson. Contemporaries also were aware of the fundamental ideological differences between the president and the Chief Justice. Therefore, the trial became a microcosm of the larger political fight going on at this time, with President Jefferson and Chief Justice Marshall representing the two conflicting ideologies of the period, federalism and anti-federalism. Now, I'd like to thank you for watching this episode of the John Marshall House History Where It Happened video series. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us at our email and our phone number listed there on the screen. And I'd like to thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.